welcome to Tales of Honor Podcast, a podcast dedicated to telling the true stories of every recipient of the Medal of Honor. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Tales of Honor Podcast. This is the only podcast that's dedicated to telling the true stories of every Medal of Honor recipient. I'm your host, Christoph Ambrose. Today's episode is episode number 286, and like I mentioned on the last podcast, I would like to start doing something a little bit more informative at the very beginning of each episode. Today, I'm going to do two things. First, reminding you that March is the month which Medal of Honor Day presides. It is March 25th. And this was created back in 1991. President Bush signed it into law on the 15th of November, 1990. And it is National Medal of Honor Day. That is coming up on the 25th of this month. And the second bit I would like to do here is congratulating Matthew Williams on his promotion. Matthew Williams received the Medal of Honor from President Trump back in October 30th, 2019, for his actions in April of 2008, and he just was promoted to Sergeant Major since he is still currently serving. So that's our Medal of Honor news and current events for today. If this is what you want to keep hearing, let me know. If not, also let me know. Wouldn't want to do something you don't like. On with today's episode, which, like I mentioned, is 286 and continues on with World War I. And now, a tale of honor. George was born in the Ottoman Empire on the 5th of February, 1896. He joined his father, who emigrated to the U.S. in 1908, later in 1910 at the age of 14. For 2 years, George lived in Somerville, Massachusetts before traveling to Greece in 1912 to volunteer to fight in the Greek army during the First Balkan War. He stayed there and also fought in the Second Balkan War, but then returned to Somerville and went to school. Not one to apparently sit still, George once again left to volunteer to fight in the U.S. Army during the Mexican Border War from 1916 to 1917. He once again answered the call of duty when the U.S. entered World War I, and he was a member of the 26th Division when he arrived in France, and it was his actions several months after arriving that would earn him the Medal of Honor. The citation reads, "After his platoon had gained its objective along a railroad embankment, PFC Dilboy, accompanying his platoon leader to reconnoiter the ground beyond, was suddenly fired upon by an enemy machine gun from 100 yards. From a standing position on the railroad track, fully exposed to view, he opened fire at once, but failing to silence the gun, rushed forward with his bayonet fixed through a wheat field toward the gun emplacement, falling within 25 yards of the gun with his right leg nearly severed above the knee and with several bullet holes in his body. With undaunted courage, he continued to fire into the emplacement from a prone position, killing 2 of the enemy and dispersing the rest of the crew." 5 months after his death, the commanding general of the Northeastern Department presented the Medal of Honor to George's father. He was originally buried at the Aix-en-Marne American Cemetery in France, but it was requested that he be buried at his birth town. Reportedly, 17,000 mourners were present when his flag-draped coffin moved through the streets to the church to lay before the high altar. However, Turkish troops seized the town and not only ransacked the church and stole the American flag from the coffin, but desecrated his grave and his coffin overturned. President Harding dispatched the USS Litchfield to Turkey in September of 1922 in order to recover the remains of George and demanded a formal apology from the Turkish government, which he did receive. His casket was once again draped in the American flag and delivered by a Turkish Guard of Honor to the American landing party and brought back to the States. On the 12th of November, 1923, George was given a full military honors burial and went on to be honored by 3 U.S. presidents. President Wilson had signed the Medal of Honor authorization, President Harding aided with bringing him back to the States, and President Coolidge was present at the final burial. Today, veterans of foreign wars Post 529 in Somerville and Dilboy Field and Stadium are named in his honor. There is also a monument in front of Somerville's City Hall and one in front of the Hines Veterans Administration Hospital in Hines, Illinois, both dedicated in his honor. George Dilboy is buried in the Arlington National Cemetery, Section 18, Site 4574. He was 22 years old when he died. And that was a tale of honor. Thank you for listening to Tales of Honor Podcast. Head on over to talesofhonorpodcast.com where you can read these stories, see other ways to support the show, and easily share a story with your friends and family. Tales of Honor Podcast is written and produced by Christoph Ambrosch, and theme song, A New Beginning, is by Ben Sound. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to talesofhonorpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Christoph Ambrosch. Thanks for listening.